Hello, Harry here, and welcome back to another episode of Jog On. Jog On now comes in the form of both the video podcast and the podcast itself, as well as releasing weekly running-themed videos on the YouTube channel. So do check it out. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you want to get in contact, it's thisisjogon@gmail.com. On Instagram, it's @jogonpodcast. And now, on to the episode. Now, on today's episode, I had the absolute pleasure of talking with Jess Robson. Now, Jess is the founder of the community known as Run Talk Run, which has grown tremendously over the last couple of years to what is now a global community. Run Talk Run describe themselves as a global mental health support community meeting for weekly jogs worldwide. And this was all the idea, or the brainchild, if you like, of Jess herself. I talked to Jess about her own personal struggles.
So 2017 was a pretty dark year for me.
Her journey into running.
So I think it really helped give me that sense of community and identity right from the get-go.
And of course, the growth of Run Talk Run itself.
To see so many Run Talk Run t-shirts in one hit was special.
It was a fascinating, insightful conversation. I felt very lucky to actually get to talk with her, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did.
I don't know how to say this on a running podcast, but I'm actually quite...
So, without further ado, please welcome to Jog On, Jess Robson. You describe, I made a note of this, you describe yourself as not a therapist, not a running coach, just a girl who believes in the therapeutic nature of opening up whilst physically moving forwards, which really rings true with me, like I completely can understand that. What for you was that moment? I know you were in Oxford, you sort of went out and did a bit of running. Like, was it a bit of a gradual build up where you started to realize that running might do something quite healthy for you?
So I think at the start of my sort of running journey, I was running alone most of the time. So I didn't really understand that opening up whilst running was really something that was going to help me. But starting running was largely driven by my eating disorder. I very, very quickly turned that around. And I sort of say that with hesitance because running away from an eating disorder isn't the most healthy approach to recovering. But I think, it was around the age of 19 that I realized that it was doing a lot of good for my self-esteem and a lot of good in giving me something positive to talk about. Didn't really have a strong sense of identity at that age, which made me really shy. So I think it really helped give me that sense of community and identity right from the get-go.
And it was bulimia was the actual condition, if you like, that you suffered from. Did that go on for quite a few years? Like, when did that start?
Yes, it started around the age of 14. And
do you know why? Why? How does that begin for a person? Have you ever found the root cause of why that begins?
I think for me personally, it's largely driven by anxiety and feeling things really intensely. So for me, my experience with bulimia, I would end up overeating as a way to sort of numb the anxiety. In the same way that a lot of people would comfort eat, and that's kind of healthy, you know. People turn to food to sort of kind of numb down some uncomfortable feelings sometimes. And for me, that brought on a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, and I would end up then throwing up that food. So for me, largely it came from a result of feeling anxious, which is the cause that I can find for that eating disorder. And it sort of lasted for about 5 years, like I say, until I was 19 and found running. But it does kind of creep back in if I find myself slipping into a negative pattern with my thoughts, anxiety, depression.
And I think that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is, do you feel like you ever fully conquer it? Or is it always a small voice at the back of your head that is sometimes just kind of, like you say, if you get into a bad place, does it creep back in? Or do you feel like you ever get over it? Does it ever leave you fully?
I don't think it ever will leave me fully. It's definitely something that I manage as opposed to have recovered from. There are certain situations or just environments that will trigger some negative thoughts around food. I often experience like supermarket overwhelm.
Yeah.
It might sound silly.
No, I get it.
But having a lot of choice with food can quite often raise my anxiety really high, and like bulimic impulses come in, like the urge to binge and purge, which I kind of just got used to the fact that certain things will trigger me in that way, and I've found ways to talk myself down from that level.
So you sort of become familiar with certain patterns.
Exactly that. I'm very aware of how my thoughts spiral, and sometimes it's easier than others to intercept that spiral, but I'm getting there.
One of the things that's quite interesting is this, you talk about, and you certainly talk about it in the blogs and things that you write, is this idea of bulimia comes with it a sense of shame. I think sometimes if we think of someone with a condition like that, or any kind of eating disorder, we think that they kind of, because they're doing it, they must believe it's the right thing to be doing. And so in that mind state, they are just thinking, yes, this is definitely the right thing. But actually, if you are, like you were, fully aware that this isn't a good way to be, that with that comes a huge tidal wave of shame. And so to have felt shame for so strong and so long, it's so interesting that you went the complete other direction with running, because running gives you what is pretty much the opposite of shame, which is pride. And so to have all of a sudden pride coming into your life through the act of physical exercise and running, I think that's a really interesting flip of the switch in your brain from shame to pride. Is that a fair statement? Is that kind of what you felt at the time, that you went kind of more from shame and, oh, hang on, I can feel proud about something here?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a massive shift. And one that I'm really grateful for as well. I didn't really see it coming. I didn't start running with that intention of feeling proud of myself. It was largely driven just by wanting to stay slim. So actually to have that benefit, it was the best thing for me, and continues to be as well. And
your own mum is quite a keen runner. Was she quite instrumental in getting you running as well? Or do you think deep down it was something like, I'd like to have a go at that? Did you run when you were younger? I didn't run when I was younger, no. I think subconsciously I was really inspired by her. And I probably wouldn't have had the idea to start running had I not seen her, experience a lot of success with her running. But no, she does definitely, on a conscious level, inspire me now. And it was definitely her way of helping me the last time I did go through depression. That was her way of helping me by taking me out on a run. So yeah, it certainly helps to have people around you who know that that's good for you. And I'm guessing she was probably quite delighted when you also took up running and discovered it. I know if I have children in the future, it's going to be quite difficult to not kind of want them to run a bit, because I quite like running, if you hadn't guessed. So she must have felt some pride herself that all of a sudden you were getting into running and finding, and not just getting into running in a small way, but eventually, did it quite quickly accelerate? Did you all of a sudden start doing too much, or did you gradually build up the running? Because anyone who hasn't been running for a while, you don't go out and all of a sudden do a 50-mile week. You build into these things. So for you, was that a gradual process, or did you quite quickly do a lot? No, it was always quite gradual. I don't know how to say this on a running podcast, but I'm actually quite a reluctant runner. I love how I feel after running, but the actual process of running isn't something I take loads of joy from. So obviously there's a lot that running's given me, but I think that's almost like a post-run feeling. Yeah, I didn't push it too hard or too fast. It always felt like quite effortful, if I'm totally honest. Right, yeah. And that's very common. I think that people who look at people who are keen runners, especially people who post a lot about running and stuff, think that every run they're going out on, they feel amazing, and then they feel amazing afterwards, before, during, like the whole thing, when really it's not the truth. Like most of us, 50% of our runs, during the run at some point you're going to feel like, oh, this is pretty awful. I think as you get fitter and you enjoy it more, you start to learn to settle into a pace that works for you, that you get a bit of a high from it. But you're right. The real high comes after. It's when you step into the shower or just taking your trainers off. It can sometimes happen immediately. Sometimes it can be, I've had like 45 minutes where I felt rubbish, and then all of a sudden I feel the high coming on, and it's like, whoa, this is weird. And I know it's a bit of a cliche to talk about runner's high, but certainly, there is a strong reason as to why we do it, because it does give you a bit of a buzz at the end. The run I did just 2 days ago, I felt great afterwards, and I thought, yeah. But no, I mean, I think it's a fallacy to think that people just constantly love running. So what you're saying rings completely true, and I'm sure many people feel like that. Like the actual process of running is quite uncomfortable.
And I think that's what really does help with people's mental health in running, is if you can put yourself through a run that totally sucks and it feels uncomfortable and you can keep pushing through it, you're almost telling yourself, like, I can get through uncomfortable things and see it through. It's sort of building that self-belief that you can pull through difficult stuff.
Totally, and it develops that pride that we talked about. It's a bit of a microcosm for taking on the world. I've always said that I can think back to as far back as, I don't know, let's say 2008, I ran Bristol 10K, and it is one of the worst I've ever felt in my life. I was a teenager at the time, and I felt like it was sort of like dying. I mean, it just felt felt so bad, and I still remember it to that day. And if I'm ever going through something that's a little bit difficult, I think it gives us perspective, because I think, well, this is nothing compared to that 10K, because I literally was on death's door running that 10K. I mean, I collapsed over the line kind of thing. So when you have a small thing, like you break a plate or something, it feels like nothing. I think it gives you a perspective running, because like you say, when you've pushed that hard, and the same thing for your own state of mind, I think it grounds you a bit more. It gives you a sense of reality of what we're biologically and fundamentally meant to do. And it's really interesting that you talk about the idea of how running, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit more on this. It's a fascinating concept to me, that people open up a bit more through exhaustion and through being in a sort of, running puts you in this kind of rawer state. You must know what I'm talking about, where you feel, and for some reason you can turn to a person that if you've just run 10 miles with someone, you turn to them and ask them a question, they'll kind of just give you an answer without sort of thinking about it with any social constructs. They're just a bit more honest and open. Have you come across that?
Absolutely, yes. I think with running, you're sweaty, you're a bit tired, like you said, you're raw, you're at your rawest self, and there's just no room for false pretenses. Like in life, we hold up these sort of outward appearances and barriers, whether we think we are or not, we are. And with running, it becomes heavy to hold those barriers around with us, so we have to just drop them when we're running. And I think that does it sounds a bit sneaky and manipulative, but it does lower people's inhibitions to the point where they can speak honestly about, well, what's going on for them, or answer honestly to your questions.
And you talk about that going outside sometimes can expose what's on the inside, which I think is quite a nice phrase. There's something about being out in nature and running around outdoors as well, which also, it kind of exposes what you're feeling deep down and allows you to think about what's going on. But at the same time, the singularity of running and the fact that all you can think about is how tired and much it's hurting, if you're on a run where you're really pushing it, it almost means that you can't worry about anything. You can't fret about anything, because you're focused. It's a very present thing, running. You're very yes. there in the moment.
Yeah. I think being outside almost is like an interjection to whatever spiral of thought you're in. So when I experience anxiety, for me, it's very much like a continuous almost loop of the same concern that's going around my head. And when you go for a run outside, for me, it's almost like, oh, I've got to pay attention to the road and the cars and the pain of running. And it's just like an interception to that cycle. And it kind of shifts the thoughts. I don't know how. I just sort of see them as thoughts that are sitting in my head really stuck. But running gets them moving. It sort of shakes them about a bit, which makes them easier to access.
Yeah, I get that.
That's probably sounds quite wishy-washy, but
no, not at all.
Yeah, how it feels.
I don't think we'll ever fully be able to really explain the mind, because it's so complex and there's so much going on, but at least we can give an idea of what's happening. But like you say, running can kind of, if something's fast moving and you've got a lot of thoughts and you need to just stop them, and running almost drives a bit of a wedge in, and it says, you can't keep thinking like that. You have to focus on the here and now, and right now my calf hurts, or whatever it is, whilst you're pounding down the pavement. So obviously, you you're in Oxford. It was a business and media school that you went to, and it was like a sort of, I don't know the correct term, but a sort of a PA training centre place.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the right way to describe
That's
it.
right, yeah.
And then you move out into the world of work. Talk me through the process of how Run Talk Run begins. What are the very first stages? What gives you the idea for combining the idea of a running group such as Run Talk Run?
So the idea was, well, it largely came from my last sort of prolonged period of depression. So 2017 was a pretty dark year for me. And I found myself coming home to Sussex every weekend to run with mum. And I yeah. I sort of found that I was opening up a lot more on those runs with mum than I was in my therapy sessions. And whilst it was lovely coming home to run, it made more sense for me to go back and find some running friends in London. And it was through looking at all the London running communities. As amazing as they are, they seem super intimidating, super fast, super cool as well. I'm not really the cool kid.
I'm not cool.
I'm not cool. And it just seemed a bit scary for me. So I just kind of wanted to create the space that I needed, which was a gentle 5K where no one cared about pace and we could talk about how crap we're actually feeling without feeling judged for it. So it was almost a selfish need. And I started just by putting it out there on Instagram, really. Very straightforward. Did it from my own account at first, got no traction. So decided to give it the name of Run Talk Run. And the anonymity of that helped a lot.
And one of the things that I most liked about your story was, as sort of dark as it sounds, I'm quite drawn to the story of someone where there's very little sign of hope, but they carried on anyway. And for you, that was you arranged to meet outside of Monument Station and go on these runs on a Thursday, and it was going to be a weekly thing. And you talk about in the blog that there were many times where nobody showed up, like it was just you. And, it might have been pouring with rain or it might have been freezing cold in the winter, but you still turn up and you're there and you wait to see if anyone else turns up. And if they don't, you still just carry on and do the run anyway. And then you're back there again the next Thursday. And I love that image of, as I say, it sounds almost in a dark way, but I love the image of you sort of standing there alone at Monument Station, but still persevering and carrying on because you believe that this will turn into something. Talk me through those moments. There must have been hopeless moments where you thought, what is the point?
Yes. For the first 6 months, it was very much a sort of argument, is this actually making me more ill? Because it was knocking my esteem every week that no one would show up. And I was still I was still depressed when starting this. So I wasn't starting it from the most solid, resilient point. The only thing that got me there every Thursday was the thought that someone else would turn up looking for support and the person that's meant to be there facilitating that support doesn't show up. And I couldn't let that happen. So I went there every week purely just because the thought of not being there for someone else, it killed me. So I think showing up for other people helped me show up for myself.
And it meant you were getting a weekly training run in. But it's interesting that empathy
exactly.
was the sort of the factor that kept you there, of all things, which I guess is a big part of what Run Talk Run eventually has been about, is empathy and understanding other people.
Yeah, I think someone said to me recently, like, had I found a running community that was like Run Talk Run, instead of creating it, say I had found it, a place to turn up to, I might have found it so much harder to do that for myself, to go along every week. But it was because I was doing it for the purpose of someone else's mental health, that I found it so much easier to show up every week and run.
That's the irony of it. And I think that's quite commonplace. That's almost is a slight stereotype, but there's a lot of truth in it, that people who are often struggling or suffering themselves are the ones who are most likely to help others, which is quite interesting,
Yes, 100%. And I see it amongst all of our run leaders. They're all driven by their own experiences mostly. And I think that's kind of beautiful in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Want to help other people with it.
So Run Talk Run itself, where does it go from there? So the barren loneliness of Monument Station, how does one day someone will paint that picture? What is it that starts to build? You start to have the first few people turning up. How does it grow from there?
There were a few consistent people. I really mean a few, like 2 or 3, for the first few months. And I think for those first few months, I was kind of okay with that. In fact, I was very comfortable with that. I was quite anxious about meeting new people. So
there's a part of you that kind of is like, I'm fine with my small group.
I was. The way I saw it was, if I'm only impacting myself and these 2 other runners, I'm okay with that, you know?
It's something.
That's 3 people who are coming away with a better day. It was around the following spring. So it started in October. It was the following March that we started gaining a bit of traction as the weather got better. Mm-hmm. And it was the following June that we got a bag drop location, which just transformed things. So we have a lot to thank the Bridge Gym in Southwark for giving us a home.
For people who completely don't understand that, essentially especially I'd imagine in the kind of the London area, having a bag drop or just a place where people can leave their stuff for a run is incredibly helpful. Otherwise you're all running with backpacks and whatnot, and it's not ideal.
Absolutely. With everyone coming from work, people, especially in London, when you're turning up to a running group, you expect things like a toilet and a place to change and a place to leave your bag. So yeah, having all of that come from that June just helped us grow. It really did help people be able to turn up. And we were just the one support group for 12 months until a lady in Peterborough saw what we were doing and wanted to Jen, yes.
We know Jen.
And wanted to recreate it. So that was the start of Run Talk Run growing.
So is that kind of like, do you franchise it? How does that work?
I don't call them franchises.
No, I know that's terribly, horribly business sounding, but I don't know what other word to give it.
So essentially, every run leader has a lot of ownership over their run. Mm-hmm. I support every leader as much as they want me to. And there are consistencies across all of the Run Talk runs. All of our runs are 5 kilometres. All of our runs are non-competitive, and all of our runs are focused on being a safe space to talk about mental health. Aside from those 3 core values, you know, a run leader can run it in a park, or they can run it on trails, or in a busy city. I don't really mind. The run is their own. Yeah. So, yeah, we now have a lot of runs, and if I was to micromanage all of those runs, it just wouldn't work. So yeah, the leaders have a lot of authority over their own community.
And the crazy thing is, it's now gone outside of the UK, it's gone global. I think the first one outside the UK was North California, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And then from there, you almost look impressed. And then it's gone. It's over. Well, the last thing I read, it was in over 46 countries. That number may have grown again, even during lockdown. But that must just make your head swim a little bit. Like when you remember back, it was just you and 2 other people. I remember one of them was called Amy. I don't remember anyone else's name, I'm afraid. There was a guy who was very instrumental. I can't remember his name. But yeah, you must just sometimes sit back and go. Like, I don't know, I know there was one, you were talking about one starting up in Dubai, when you think, what? Like, how has this happened? Do you just sit there and think, what?
A lot has happened in 18 months. You know, the first year, like we've just said, was kind of slow. So a lot has happened in 18 months. And I do have those moments of, oh, wow, okay, we're here now. And sometimes actually for a girl who is quite sensitive, it can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Even if it is a positive overwhelm, it does kind of blow my mind a bit. But the thing that truly astonishes me and shouldn't surprise me still is the amount of people that are willing to give up their time to host that space every week. It's not just that we're hosting so many runs, we're hosting quite an intimate space. So yeah, there's a lot of kind people in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing once you get yourself into those situations. We do naturally sort of think, oh, why would anyone bother, kind of thing. And then you start to expose all this amazing generosity and kindness. It comes out in these kind of situations and you realize how cool people are. I mean, as I understand it, you've kind of gone pretty much full time with Run Talk Run now, whilst doing some bits and pieces on the side still.
Yes, I quit my full-time job 18 months ago, just as Run Talk Run was starting to get a bit busier.
Yeah.
And I've been working part-time since.
Okay.
So yeah, I have a lot more time to put into Run Talk Run, which it needs. But no, I do work part-time.
One of the patterns that I noticed is, you're welcome to disagree with me, but I think it's fair to say that at times you might have almost verged on slight workaholic status. There was something you said about always wanting to do more. And weirdly, even when you were doing, I think it was PA work at the time, that because you were efficient and organized, you were getting things done almost a bit too quickly and efficiently. And therefore it left you too much time to think and ponder about what else you could be doing. And that inability to say no to things sometimes can get to a point where it's quite detrimental. Is that something that's ongoing, that sometimes you have to sit back and be like, it's okay, Jess, you can just chill. You don't need to keep doing more and more and more. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement. And I think this lockdown experience has really helped force me to be okay with doing less.
Yeah.
It's something I struggle with, actually, very much so. And I think that's kind of natural, especially when you're running something like Run Talk Run, where there is so much you could be doing to support people. There's always things that you could be doing to support people.
Yeah.
So being okay with not working on that all the time has been something I've had to
of course.
just,
and I
think get my head around.
that must be driven by where you have that strong sense of empathy. I think that will only drive that sense more, because you think, I know that Sharon was struggling last week or whatever, so it'll play on your mind, I should probably check up on that person. I think you yourself, Jess, could almost put yourself in danger of not just working on yourself and being happy yourself, because there is that element of just throwing yourself in front of buses to protect other people all the time. I've seen it in the past, and it can be you can almost be too lovely, so lovely that to other people, and such a nice person that it's just detrimental to yourself, because you kind of pause for a moment and you go, oh, I haven't taken any time for myself. I've been worrying about everyone else, and actually I'm not so good. So it's interesting you talk about lockdown as being a chance to kind of reflect, because it basically forces your hand. You literally, you can't go see Sharon. That's it. You can do a certain amount of phone calls and video calls, but you can't do anything else. So overall, has lockdown kind of been a positive thing for that?
It has. I mean, obviously it comes with challenges, and I miss actually Run Talk Running, and I miss my friends. But having the time to slow down has been incredible. And it's made me think about how I can set those boundaries in different ways. So, for example, I've been holding a daily Run Talk Run over the phone. Nice. Just one, though. Not speaking to all my runners throughout the day, but just one runner a day.
Yeah, not all 46 countries.
Nope. And it's about, setting boundaries really with how much I can take on.
August 2019 saw the first Run Talk Run Park Run takeover, which I think was Tooting Park Run.
Yes.
And you had over 40 volunteers. I mean, that is mad, considering it's October 2017, Lonely Station Monument Jess to Tooting Park Run, 40 volunteers, Run Talk Run takeover. That's a crazy jump. What was that like, doing that park run that day, if you have a clear memory of it?
I love how you keep jumping back to the sad image of me alone.
Sorry, it's the focal point.
It's fine. It was wonderful to see it. So Josh, who leads Run Talk Run Tooting, his particular run has just, to say it's blossomed, it doesn't do it justice. It has grown in popularity to such an extent where he has to delegate to other runners to lead it with him.
Yeah, fantastic.
And it was wonderful to see them all pulling together under the Run Talk Run name at a park run like that. Just to see so many Run Talk Run t-shirts in one hit was special. But yeah, credit to Josh, because he's built a wonderful community with Tooting.
Run Talk Run must have got you to meet people that you just never would have met otherwise.
Yeah. That's been the best thing about it. And mostly that comes with the leaders, the people that are facilitating these runs.
Yeah.
Like, to be connected with them, it's just like, so cool.
So the word community comes up a lot, as you know, in your blogs and just in general with running. And one of the things I want to come on to, having talked about the growth of Run Talk Run, is sometimes there's a ceiling to how many people can be in one group and it can still have that communal feel. Obviously, I think with Run Talk Run, you can go bigger and bigger and bigger because it still has that massive commonality thread running through the middle of it. And that allows you to be able to, I've literally never seen this person in this Tooting group before or whatever, but I can immediately talk to them because you've got the power of we're both running. You've got the power of the theme of Run Talk Run. You're probably coming at least a few shared experiences. And that breaks it down quite quickly. One of the words that keeps coming up is community. And it was really interesting for me that you were in what has, in many polls, as I'm sure you know, come up as one of the loneliest places in the UK, which is London, which would surprise people because they think it's London. It's like everybody's there. It's all happening in London. But I've walked through London by myself, and you see thousands of people, but in a weird way, the more people you see, the lonelier you feel. And people don't say hello to each other because you'd be saying that 1,000 times every hour. It'd be insane. It's not like you're out for a countryside walk and it's, oh, hello, good afternoon. It's very different in the city. Loneliness must have been a theme for you, and particularly when you're based in London, there must have been times when it's like being, you're in the busiest room in the world and yet you feel so alone. And it sounds sort of contradictory, but did you experience that London actually does lack community in a way if you don't get involved with these groups?
Yes, I say that tentatively though. So I didn't realize how much I needed community until I had it. I didn't really acknowledge that I was lonely until I wasn't lonely with Run Talk Run. Having said that though, I am definitely the sort of person who rather enjoys her own company. And I love to be alone, surrounded by people. So London really worked for me in that sense. I didn't necessarily feel alone. When I was in a good headspace, I quite liked that I was on my own in a busy coffee shop and no one was looking at me or acknowledging me. I think it depends on where you're at in your head. If your mind is in a pretty dark place, being on your own with your mind is not fun. So I think that was the key difference for me, really.
And being in a place like London where there is a lot going on, you could almost fall into that trap of thinking that everyone else around you is having a great time and that it's just you that's feeling like this. And why can't you be? You might be walking past a bar and you see like a stag do and they're all cheering and celebrating, and you kind of think, oh, everyone else is happy but me. And that's a trap that you can fall into.
It certainly was, yeah. And I think that's what put me off the other running groups as well. Everyone seems so extrovert and so chatty and so good vibes only that actually for me, being in quite a depressed state seemed far too extreme in the other direction for me. So
it didn't feel like it would be easing you in. It felt like it would just be sort of throwing a firework at your head, and it's like, that's a bit much.
Yeah.
The shyness that you felt at your time in Oxford and things like that, you've done things now like public speaking and whatnot. That is quite a drastic change. Do you feel like you've learnt how to do these things better? Is it just a natural part of growing up? Do you think as you get older, you do start to find more of an identity and so you become more confident? Or has running been quite instrumental in that confidence? What do you credit for turning from someone who was quite shy to someone who now can go out and do a public speech?
I think it's a combination of those things. I think that the most instrumental thing has been Run Talk Run and forcing myself into these situations where I have to step up and be the first one to speak. So it would have been pretty useless if I'd put myself at Monument Station and someone turned up and I'd not said a word. It wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
So I forced myself into confronting it. I don't think I've necessarily got better at it. I don't think I'm necessarily a a confident, clear speaker. In fact, when I spoke at the National Running Show, if I listen back to the videos, my voice is shaking, my hands are shaking. I'm not a clear speaker by any stretch. But what I have done is learned to care a lot less about that.
That's a big part of it.
To do it anyway, despite not necessarily being super polished or, TEDx material.
I was going to say, are you going to do a TEDx at some point? You feel like a TEDx candidate, for that journey, that story. It's totally true. I mean, public speaking is, it's a weird thing. I think the big secret that a lot of people don't realize is you have to remember that, like, if you've ever been and seen a talk, you don't sit there going, oh, like, they're probably going to be rubbish, or willing them to do a bad talk. You're on their side, first of all, and also if they're going up and talking, you assume that they probably are going to be good. So you have the benefit of doubt on your side, if that makes sense, when you go up and give a talk. So actually, you'd be amazed how bad you can be going up and talking and how nervous you can be, and people will just kind of accept it, and because you get put on that stage. And I think that those creeping thoughts of, oh God, everyone's going to think I'm awful and terrible and going to laugh at me, and all the natural things that everyone feels when they go and speak in a public gathering, is just something to try to be ignored. And like you say, you have to just try to care less. And that sounds counterproductive. Like, why would you want to care less? But actually, for something like that, it's very beneficial. They say biologically it comes from when we were living in tribal communities thousands of years back, that if you were speaking publicly, quite often you were giving a reason as to why you would stay in the tribe. And that's why it feels very important instinctively. Like, naturally, we feel like, like if you'd done something wrong, and the tribe were seeking to possibly kick you out, and you had to almost like in court give your statement. Apparently that's where the real nerves come from for speaking in front of people, because you feel like you're going to lose your community, which again loops us right back around. So there's all these fascinating themes, and I've been quite fascinated with the whole biology of it and why do we feel certain ways.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting the way you've talked about the past, and you have used the word ruminating quite a lot, which is a fantastic word, but in your blogs you use the word ruminating. And that's obviously sort of reflecting and thinking quite heavily on things, particularly that things have happened in the past. And that got me thinking about your relationship with the past. Have you got quite good at accepting what's happened and sort of moving on from it? Are you still someone that lingers on things?
I think I always will be someone who will linger on things.
Yeah.
I don't think I can change that about me. I'd love to say that I don't ever dwell, but I do.
I think we all do a bit.
Yeah, I think the difference is now I allow myself to dwell and feel sad, because I think that's an important part of processing things that have happened in the past. Say, for example, you went through a breakup. It's okay to dwell on that and to think, oh, I wonder what they're doing now, or I wonder what I could have done different. That's kind of normal. But the key is to acknowledge when that dwelling is making you feel worse than it is better, when that it's not even processing anymore, you're just repeating the same thought over and over, and it's not actually moving you forward. Ruminating is fine if it's going to help you move forward. So sort of productive ruminating, and then there's negative ruminating. It's being able to distinguish the difference. Breakups are a weird one. I think culturally we've been told that when you are breaking up with someone, you have to get over them and banish them from your mind. And for people in our culture, in our generation, that's deleting photos and trying to like sort of rid yourself of evidence. And I've always believed that that's a bad idea. Like I'll tell you something right now. On the YouTube videos, if you go back a fair few months, there's a couple of videos, 3 or 4, with my ex-girlfriend that are still there. I mean, they're not lovey-dovey or anything, like she's running a race, I'm running a race, blah, blah, but she appears in them. And I don't see myself ever taking those down, because like it happened. Why would I deny it? It is what it is. I regret nothing, and let's move on. And there's a fantastic memory. And I think that's particularly hard for some people. Certainly people I've met in the past, I've found that certainly if I've gone through a breakup, their tactic has been very much to, let's cut this clean off. Like I have to completely move on. Whereas I don't know, I've always gone more with like, why fight that? Just settle into it, accept what will be. And that when you do ruminate,
ruminate positively and think about good times, and don't let that make you sad, and think about the future. And again, that comes down to perspective. And, you know, there are 7 billion of us on the planet now. You're not never going to find someone ever again, like, or you won't if you do think like that. Ironically, you can't take control of your emotions that much and shut them off, because in the end, you're just going to feel worse. I know this has moved on to like a relationship episode. It's about running.
Yeah,
I just find that
my
fascinating.
fault.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. It's just I just find that whole thing fascinating. That idea of what's in the past and being able to take it, even quite a negative experience, and say, well, this is how it's helped me, and this is how I've got up from it and moved on. So it's good to hear that you are getting better at that, and you obviously are understanding that process more and more.
Or, I say about setting boundaries with other people. I set boundaries with myself as well. Sometimes, okay, so I'm the sort of person, if I feel sad, chances are I'm going to cry. I'm a massive crier. So I literally clock myself sometimes. I'll take myself to my room and be like, right, I can't spend more than 2 hours in here crying. Like, I've got to then cut that boundary. I'm allowed to feel sad. That's okay. But then, I've got to move forward. So, set boundaries on your sadness.
It's interesting though, isn't it? And you sort of drag yourself back out of it at a moment, and you might feel terrible for 5 minutes, but it's amazing how quickly the storm can pass, and all of a sudden you feel fine. And it's also like, I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to get on and cook, or whatever I needed to do.
Yeah, back to life.
Yeah, productivity is a huge thing. I think naturally we are, we're meant to work and to help our community, and if we feel like people talk about duvet days, and we have this idea that just chilling and relaxing, like the idea of these holidays where you go and sit by a pool for 7 hours and then you go and have a meal and then you go to sleep, is like my idea of a nightmare, because I think that's what would, if I were to ever spiral, that's the kind of thing that would send me down, is just not doing anything and not feeling like I'm being productive at all. That lack of productivity for me is the worst thing. But then you've also got the balance if you don't want to go into sort of workaholic PA Jess 2017 level and move to the other extreme, and then feel like you don't have time for any kind of chilling. So it's a fine balance.
It really is. And I really feel what you've said about doing nothing would be almost the worst environment for you. I think it would be for me as well. And it frustrates me that one of the biggest sort of bits of advice that is given to people who are feeling sad or anxious is, you should slow down, you should rest. Sometimes slowing down, that's what my depressed brain wants to do. I need to move. I need to go and create.
2015, you get an amazing tattoo that says "It's a state of mind" down the side. Did you get that tattoo in a low moment? Was it an attempt to get out of something, or was it when you were feeling positive and you thought, I want to remind myself that this is temporary?
I was, in 2015, very much coming out of a low period. So I wouldn't say it was like a completely positive place, but it was very much a time when I had shown myself some grit in pulling through quite a traumatic year. So, yeah, it was done in a positive place, but very much a case of reflecting on using my state of mind to pull me through something quite crap.
Yeah, that must be painful. Is it painful to get a tattoo on your ribs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've already told you I'm a crier. I cried all the way through.
Yeah.
It was painful.
One of the final things I did when I was doing a bit of background research on Run Talk Run and yourself and understanding the concept, and I thought, well, one last thing I'll do is I'll check on YouTube and see if there's any kind of like video footage. And I found this fantastic video by a guy called Joe Watts, that was just like beautifully shot, like obviously a great guy with the camera, which was shots of you running and everything, but also at the same time sort of an interview type thing with you, and then he played the voice over the top, and it was you talking about your experiences with running and how it's helped you mentally, and a bit about Run Talk Run itself. And someone, do you know what, funnily enough, someone had commented, I think it's like 3 days ago, someone's just freshly commented, because that came out like over 2 years ago now, and they commented saying, so great, don't quote me on this, but it was something like, so great to see how far Run Talk Run has come since this video was shot. And it's quite cool because they obviously watched the video back then, and now Run Talk Run is what it is, and it's this it's gone global, and it's this huge amazing community. Well, I mean, that's pretty much leaves me to wrap up, Jess. I think what you've built is amazing. I think it's going to continue to build final question really is, where do you see Run Talk Run going next? What are your aspirations for where you'd like to see it go?
My answer to this question is very, very simple. So my goal for Run Talk Run is to make mental health support more accessible. And so to make it more accessible, it means more Run Talk Runs in more locations. So whilst I'm not fussed about numbers, having more Run Talk Runs does mean that we are reaching more people and providing that space to say that you're not okay, and providing that space to not have to show up smiley.
I love what it's about and what it's doing.
Thank you.
Jess, thanks very much for coming on. I think you're very inspirational. I think what you've built is incredible. I look forward to seeing how Run Talk Run develops over the coming years. I will leave you with something you wrote yourself, which I just thought was really interesting. It's a piece you wrote on a blog, and I particularly liked it, so I printed it out, and I thought I'd read this bit out. I had to because I've I mark Jog On as non-expletive. I don't know how to word it. You said it as there's no swearing, so I've had to change one of the words.
Oh.
No, it's cool.
Sorry.
It's fine. No, it's
I think
cool.
I've actually sworn somewhere else as well.
I think twice. I can dub it. I'll just dub it over and be like, silly or whatever.
Should have checked.
No, it's cool. I'll see what happens. Stuff that. When I stop to consider all of the ways that life is outside of my control, ill health, other people's intentions, etc., why? Why would I take the one power that I do have? Why? Why would I take away the one thing that I can control? The ability to make decisions based on what I want to see, what I want to be, how I want to live. Why wait to see what happens when you can go and make things happen? This year, there will be no more dancing around the edges, no more tantalising with what I could have, or reminiscing over what I did have. No more waiting to see what will happen, just making things happen. Jess, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of Jog On. If you would like to help out, we are selling the Jog On tops. You can email thisisjogon@gmail.com with a size request. And remember to hit subscribe for more podcast episodes or videos. I'm Harry. Thank you for joining me. Stay safe out there. Go for that run. And this is Jog On.